It was a world of heroic legends, a mythic past of knights, pirates, and gentlemen adventurers. A world defined by the clash of steel and a sweep of a feathered hat. It was a time and place where virtue lived again, where clear lines separated the hero from the villain. At the heart of this world were the dashing swordsmen of the screen. This is the world of crossed swords, the Hollywood swashbuckler. At a time when the real world seemed hopelessly mired in depression and the fallout of world wars, the swashbuckler tradition provided audiences with an escape. The stories had their origins in the romantic literature of Western Europe, when writers like Sir Walter Scott laid the foundation for the historical novel. Later, authors like Alexandre Dumas, creator of The Three Musketeers, and Raphael Sabatini offered the world stories and characters that embodied the elusive quality of chivalry. Motivated by a higher calling, the characters in the swashbuckler tradition represented the best of human nature, protecting the noble values of the established order. These qualities appealed to both men and women, which is one reason early filmmakers wasted no time in translating these popular adventure stories to the screen. However, it was the work of one Hollywood star in particular who made the genre his own and defined it for generations to come. The swashbuckler genre as we know it today truly began with Douglas Fairbanks. Beginning in 1920 with The Mark of Zorro and continuing on throughout the decade, Fairbanks bounded across the screen in one glorious costume epic after another, and made audiences feel alive through his own love for adventure. With his agility and enthusiasm, Fairbanks single-handedly defined the genre and embodied the spirit of heroism. Inspired by Fairbanks's popularity, other studios soon got into the act. 1934 saw the release of MGM's Treasure Island and United Artists' The Count of Monte Cristo. When Warner Brothers decided to adapt a Raphael Sabatini novel called Captain Blood, they chose for the lead an unknown actor from Australia by the name of Errol Flynn. The film created a sensation, thanks in part to the sincerity that Flynn brought to the role. It was perhaps the most dynamic debut of any leading man in the history of films, and it launched a second cycle of Hollywood swashbucklers that lasted until the Second World War. Flynn himself would follow Captain Blood and enjoy even greater success with The Adventures of Robin Hood and The Seahawk. Unlike Fairbanks, Errol Flynn had significant competition in the swashbuckling genre. In 1937, David O. Selznick produced one of the greatest of all swashbucklers, The Prisoner of Zenda, starring Ronald Colman. Over at 20th Century Fox, Darryl Zanuck remade The Mark of Zorro with his dark and sensitive star, Tyrone Power. In the 1940s, Douglas Fairbanks Jr. embraced his father's legacy and made swashbucklers like the Corsican Brothers and The Exile. The start of World War II suspended the swashbuckler genre, but when the war was over, it returned in full force. While Errol Flynn continued on in films like The Adventures of Don Juan, other actors made their mark. Actors like Lewis Hayward, and Stuart Granger. Perhaps Granger's best role in the genre is that of Scaramouche. Based on another Sabatini novel, the film features the longest sword fight in movie history, clocking in at over 6 minutes and taking place all around a Parisian theater. If there's one hallmark that truly defines the swashbuckler, it's sword fighting. Some of the most memorable scenes in Swashbucklers involve a duel, such as the great final scene between Errol Flynn and Basil Rathbone in The Adventures of Robin Hood. Not surprisingly, many of the men serving as fight choreographers in Hollywood were former fencing champions. They designed a romantic style of swordplay well suited for the film medium, where the hero's sword became an extension of the man. One of the most prolific fencers during the Golden Age was Fred Cavins, who worked on many of the films that starred Douglas Fairbanks and Errol Flynn. Another great fencing master who worked with Flynn was Bob Anderson. Anderson would later work on the first Star Wars trilogy. This spring, for 3 months, beginning in March 2013, the Park Ridge Public Library is proud to offer the very best in classic swashbuckling. Within our castle walls, the Cross Swords program will recapture the glory of eras gone by. We'll take you to a less cynical time, when justice for all always prevailed. The series premieres on March 10th at the Pickwick Theater, with a special 75th anniversary screening of Errol Flynn's The Adventures of Robin Hood. This 1938 classic features one of the greatest casts of all time, including Olivia de Havilland, Claude Rains, and Basil Rathbone. The series debuts at the Park Ridge Public Library the following Thursday night, March 14th, with Douglas Fairbanks in his magnificent sequel to The Three Musketeers, The Iron Mask. This film was Fairbanks' last swashbuckler, and his farewell to the silent film era. On March 21st, British star Robert Donat stars in the definitive 1934 version of The Count of Monte Cristo. Then on March 28th, it's Errol Flynn's first swashbuckler at Warner Brothers, Captain Blood. On April 4th, Ronald Colman is a pretender to the throne with a dual role in The Prisoner of Zenda. This beautiful fable of love and heroism also stars Madeleine Carroll as the princess and Douglas Fairbanks Jr. as Rupert of Hentzau. On April 11th, we'll present the rarely screened historical epic The Buccaneer, starring Frederick March and directed by the legendary Cecil B. DeMille. On April 18th, it's our second movie version of the Iron Mask story, and this time Lewis Hayward stars as the Man in the Iron Mask. Then on April 25th, Tyrone Power makes his mark as the legendary Spanish Avenger in The Mark of Zorro. Cross Swords returns to the historic Pickwick Theater on April 28th with a showing of The Black Pirate, starring Douglas Fairbanks. This wonderful adventure, featuring everything we associate with pirate films, was shot in the early 2-strip Technicolor process. And there'll be live organ accompaniment, provided by the Silent Film Society of Chicago. After a week off, the series returns to the library on May 9th with Errol Flynn in The Seahawk. Tyrone Power follows on May 16th aboard the Black Swan. And on May 23rd, Errol Flynn makes his final appearance in our program as the legendary lover Don Juan in The Adventures of Don Juan. Finally, on May 30th, Cross Swords comes to a rousing climax with Stuart Granger, Janet Leigh, and Eleanor Parker starring in the 1952 film Scaramouche. All films will be shown with short subjects and a brief introduction by film historian Matthew C. Hoffman. Starting March 10th, we invite everyone to return to honor.